The cargo bay of Station Meridian 7 was never supposed to collapse. The structural integrity sensors had been green for 3 consecutive cycles, and the maintenance logs showed no irregularities. But when the support beam gave way with a metallic shriek that echoed through the lower decks, none of that mattered to the people caught beneath it. Marcus Webb had been running supplies to the docking ring when the ceiling came down. He was human, unremarkable by most standards, working a logistics contract that paid enough to keep him moving between stations. He had no combat training, no special abilities, and no particular reason to be a hero. But when he saw the figure pinned beneath the twisted metal, instinct took over. The alien officer was tall, easily 7 feet, with skin that shifted between deep violet and midnight blue, depending on the light. Her uniform was torn, and a piece of rebar had punctured through her shoulder, dark blood pooling beneath her. Her species, the Valkyrin, were known throughout the sector as formidable warriors, but right now she looked frighteningly mortal. Marcus dropped his cargo container and ran. The bay was filling with smoke from severed power lines, and he could hear the groaning of metal still shifting overhead. He had maybe 2 minutes before the entire section came down. "Hey, stay with me," he said, kneeling beside her. Her eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangular pattern, focused on him with difficulty. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. He assessed the situation quickly. The beam was too heavy to lift, but there was a hydraulic jack 20 feet away, used for loading heavy equipment. If he could get it under the beam, he might be able to raise it enough for her to crawl free. "Don't move," he said, already sprinting toward the equipment locker. His lungs burned from the smoke, and his eyes watered, but he found the jack and dragged it back, the wheels catching on debris. Precious seconds ticked away. He positioned the jack and began pumping the handle. The beam lifted inch by agonizing inch. The alien officer watched him, something unreadable in her triple gaze. When there was finally enough clearance, Marcus grabbed her by the uninjured arm and pulled. She was heavier than he expected, dense muscle and bone that spoke to a higher gravity world. He pulled harder, ignoring the protest in his back, and she began to slide free. The rebar tore from her shoulder with a sickening sound as she gasped, but didn't cry out. The overhead groaning intensified. Marcus looked up and saw cracks spreading across the remaining supports. "We need to move now," he said, getting his shoulder under her arm. She was nearly twice his size, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he had. They stumbled toward the bay exit, her weight threatening to drag them both down with each step. They cleared the threshold just as the rest of the ceiling collapsed behind them, a thunderous crash that sent a wave of dust and debris rolling after them. Marcus kept moving until they were well into the corridor, then carefully lowered her against the wall. "Medical," he said, reaching for his comm unit. "This is Webb in Section 7. I need emergency medical to Corridor 12. Critical injury, Valkyrin officer." The response was immediate. A team would arrive in 3 minutes. The officer looked at him, her breathing labored but steady. She raised one hand and placed it on his chest, over his heart. It was a gesture he didn't understand, but it felt significant. "You are brave," she said, her voice rough but clear now. "You risked yourself for a stranger." Marcus shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "Couldn't just leave you there?" Many would have. Before he could respond, the medical team arrived with a hover stretcher. They immediately began scanning her injuries and administering treatments. One of the medics, a Centauran with 4 arms, turned to Marcus. "You saved Commander Rail," the medic said. "Do you know who she is?" Marcus blinked. A commander, obviously. The medic's expression suggested he was missing something important, but then they were lifting Rail onto the stretcher and moving away at speed. One of them called back, "Medical will want to check you for smoke inhalation. Report to Bay 3. Marcus waved them off and sat down against the wall, suddenly exhausted. His hands were shaking and his back screamed at him. He stayed there for several minutes, catching his breath, before finally pulling himself up and heading back to retrieve his cargo container. The next day cycle, Marcus was summoned to the station commander's office. This was unprecedented. Logistics contractors didn't get called to the administrative levels unless they had seriously messed up. He ran through his recent deliveries in his mind, trying to figure out what he could have done wrong. The commander's office was intimidating, all dark metal and wide viewports showing the starfield beyond. Behind the desk sat Commander Rail, her shoulder heavily bandaged, but her posture ramrod straight. Standing beside her was a human in a crisp uniform, Station Administrator Cole. "Webb," Cole said. "Thank you for coming." Marcus nodded cautiously. "Sir?" Rail stood, moving carefully but with obvious strength. Up close and in better light, Marcus could see the scars that marked her arms and neck, the kind earned through countless battles. Her uniform bore decorations he didn't recognize, but which looked impressive. "I wish to thank you properly," Rail said. "You showed courage and selflessness. These are qualities my people value highly." "I just did what anyone would do," Marcus said. "No," Rail said firmly. "You did what few would do. I have fought in 17 campaigns across 9 systems. I have led assault teams against fortified positions. I have earned every rank and decoration through blood and service. Yet yesterday I was helpless. And you, with no obligation and considerable risk, chose to save me." Cole cleared his throat. "Webb, Commander Rail is not just any officer. She commands the station's elite security force, the rapid response team that handles everything from pirate raids to hostile boarding actions. She's been decorated by 3 separate stellar governments and is considered one of the finest tactical minds in the sector." Marcus felt his face heating up. "I didn't know." "That is precisely why your action matters," Rail said. "You saw only someone who needed help. Not rank, not reputation. Just need." She reached into her uniform and withdrew a small metal disc, engraved with symbols he couldn't read. "This is a warrior's mark from my home world. It signifies a debt of honor. I give it to you freely. If ever you have need, call on me, and I will answer." Marcus took the disc, feeling the weight of it in his palm. It was warm, as if it held heat from her body. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say you will continue to be who you are," Rail said. "The galaxy needs more humans like you." Cole smiled. "There's also the matter of the station's gratitude. Your contract is being upgraded. Full benefits, hazard pay, and priority quarters. Consider it a bonus for exceptional service." Marcus left the office in a daze, the disc secure in his pocket. He returned to his routine, running cargo and supplies, but word had spread. Other crew members nodded to him in the corridors. The Valkyran security officers, previously distant and intimidating, would stop and clasp his shoulder in passing, a gesture of respect. 2 weeks later, alarms blared through the station. Marcus was in the mess hall when the announcement came: hostile vessels approaching, possible pirate raid. All non-essential personnel were to shelter in place. Through the viewport, he could see ships detaching from the station's docking arms. Small, fast interceptors with the markings of Rail's elite force. They moved with precision, forming up and accelerating toward the threat. The battle was brief but intense. Marcus watched the distant flashes of weapons fire, his heart pounding. The pirates had miscalculated, expecting a softer target. They hadn't counted on Commander Rail and her team. When the all-clear sounded an hour later, Marcus made his way to the observation deck. He found Rail there, out of her combat armor now, watching her ship's return. She had a cut above one eye, freshly sealed but still visible. "You fight like you saved me," Marcus said, coming to stand beside her. "With everything you have." Rael looked at him, and something like a smile crossed her features. "We all have our battles. You showed me that courage exists in many forms, not just in combat, but in the choice to act when action is needed. That is a lesson worth remembering." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Marcus thought about the random chance that had put him in that cargo bay at that exact moment, about how one decision, one action, could ripple out in ways impossible to predict. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Rael said. "Never doubt it. The smallest act of courage can change everything." Later, alone in his quarters, Marcus held the warrior's mark and thought about what it meant to be brave. Not fearless, not invulnerable, but simply willing to try. Willing to reach out when someone needed help, regardless of the cost. Outside his window, Station Meridian 7 continued its endless rotation through the void, a tiny point of light and life in the vast darkness. And somewhere on board, a legendary warrior carried the memory of an ordinary human who had reminded her why the fight mattered in the first place.